Welcome to our fifth and final episode of Conversations with the Blank Experiment, where we are talking with each of the composers who wrote pieces for our debut album, Conversations by the Blank Experiment. We are happy to be joined by Emily McPherson, who wrote 631 Daybreak off of our debut album. Thank you for being here with us today.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having us. Me? Oh my god.
Anyways, so how did you come to hear about the Blank Experiment?
Well, I studied my undergraduate at Bowling Green University, which where I met you, in the saxophone studio. And I had collaborated with Drew for several previous pieces of works, and he formed his group, The Blank Experiment. Was it the freshman year, fall of 2016, or was it spring?
It was spring 2017, so would have been the end of our sophomore year, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So once he formed the group, he reached out to me and asked if I would compose a piece. So I decided I would. Thought it'd be a fun experiment to work with saxophone, clarinet, and harp. I'm super interested in working with instruments that I've never written for before. So when posed to write for the harp, I didn't want to refuse. I thought it'd be interesting and fun to explore the possibilities of that instrumentation. So, yeah.
So not a lot of people have had the opportunity to write for harp. What did you find it difficult to write for harp at first, and had you had any experience writing for it?
So I didn't really find it too difficult. The main thing is the pedals. If you're familiar with how harpists play, they have those 8 pedals, and it's a lot of mechanics that they have to deal with. So thinking about that compositionally was a shift that I had to take into consideration. I'm a pianist as well, so a lot of people think about harp in terms of piano music and will just play something on the piano and not realize how difficult it is to put that in the context of a harp. So I had reached out to Natalie Pate, who's the harpist on the piece, and just really tried to accommodate, for performance practices and easeability, because one thing that I want to make and stress importance of in writing music is that performers are able to play it and make good music out of it. So that was my main concern with writing for the harp, was figuring out the best way to write something that was easy to pick up and wasn't too difficult with the foot motions and pedals. So.
Oh, we lost Michelle. Oh. I'll edit this out.
Okay.
The first one went so well. Nobody dropped out. It was so easy, and we've had multiple ones where people just drop out. Michelle, are you there? Okay, anyways. Next question. So going a little broader than that, this instrumentation, you were one of the first people to write for this instrumentation. You were a part of what I consider to be like the first batch of composers that we asked to write for us. How was it writing for an instrumentation that had literally no music prior to that? Like, you couldn't go back and listen to recordings to see what other people did. Did you find that to be helpful or harder to do that?
I don't know if it was necessarily harder to deal with. I feel like most of my pieces have odd instrumentations in chamber ensemble settings. I don't have a piece for string quartet. I don't have a piece for wind quintet. I don't have the standard chamber ensembles. Mm-hmm. So in that sense, it wasn't too difficult for me to think about writing, just because I was already used to writing for odd instruments together. And you can always find these instrumentations groupings in orchestral music, or find examples of them together, not necessarily just in the sense of the trio, but you can do duo or, like I said, orchestral music
Mhm.
has this combination a lot. So um, I wasn't short of inspiration and examples to look at and understand. Um, but it was interesting to do because there wasn't a piece that I could look at that had that specific
Mhm.
instrumentation. Um, I'm sure that would be interesting to hear from you about how it was for you as a group to put pieces together too. Um,
Well, I remember honestly, like something you don't think about with chamber ensembles, but was very difficult for us is just how do we stand on stage? Like
mm,
every ensemble like has a fixed setup with very few instrumentation. Sometimes you'll have the soprano saxophonist on the other side in a saxophone quartet. Sometimes you'll have like the saxophonist in another spot in a reed quintet. But we didn't have anything to base that off of. So I remember for some of our earlier concerts, we actually did switch around depending on the needs that we thought the piece had. But we kind of settled on having myself in the center, the harp to my right, and the clarinet to my left. We just thought that that was the best blend and the easiest way, especially because I was typically playing a lower instrument than Michelle,
sure.
especially for our final concert up at the University of Michigan that we had back in 2019. Um, Everything she was playing B flat clarinet, so I had a lot of pieces. I was playing Barry, I was playing tenor, so me being on the lower horn, just in the center, we felt kind of balanced out the group a bit better. Um, and it was just hard not having any music.
Yeah.
So going on to your piece a little bit, 631 Daybreak. Where did that name come from?
Yeah, so I had been working on the piece for the summer of 2017. Um, and the idea was, well, at the time I was writing music in the early morning, which is odd for me because I'm normally a night owl. Um, but I would be just calm at the sunrises, and I tried to wake up before the sunrise every morning. Um, I was working at a daycare at the time, so I had early morning rises. Sometimes I'd wake up at 4:30, 5 o'clock just to be there, um, and drive in to see the sunrise. So that was a lot of inspiration to me as I was writing the piece. And um, the day that I finished the piece, I looked up the time that the sun rose, the sunrise, and the daybreak, and it was 6:31 a.m. End of, I can't remember if it was in July or if it was in August, but I do remember that the day that I finished the piece was the day, the time stamp per se of the piece. So, um, yeah.
So is there anything else you want to tell us about the piece? Any elements compositionally that you think would be interesting to share?
Um, the main things that I used in the piece in terms of difficulty level was um, circular breathing and extended periods of holding out notes for as long as possible
Mm-hmm.
in obviously the saxophone and the clarinet. Um, and I typically wouldn't write in that way, but I was writing specifically for you guys,
Mm-hmm.
and knew that you could circular breathe and it wouldn't be an issue. So I decided to take that ability of yours and put it in a piece in a way that works
Mm-hmm.
and can be musical, um,
Mm-hmm.
between the two of you. So that was really important to me, is to be able to create this continuity and this flow of constant sound, um, with the harp acting as more of an embellishment. And that's the majority of the piece. And then there's this concept of uh, different rhythms and overlapping between duple, triple, quintuple, there's septuplets, and I think that's it. But overlapping those rhythmic structures to create this swarm of sound. Um, But those were the main things that I was dealing with when I was writing the piece, and it's really that's all I want to say about that.
Well, yeah, and I remember like so many people say that like your super fast, showy, high, crazy pieces are your hardest pieces. But honestly, this piece I found very hard, especially at the beginning. It was like an endurance thing for me because I remember on the second page, I circular breathe most of the second going into the third page, and it really was. It was a chop buster, and people are always like, "Oh, like that stuff's just easy. You could just sight read that," but it's really not. Like this slower, prettier music can also be so challenging, and it was really rewarding, I thought, to put together.
Anyone who says something like slow and melodic like that is easy really has not played anything like Bach. Like, they really haven't put any time into that.
And then the professor's like, I told you to do those long tones.
For real.
For that reason.
Shaking their head in the corner. So anyone who has seen this piece live will know that one of the big things that people will take away is the ending. The saxophone, myself and Michelle walk over to the harp, and all three of us are playing on the harp. Can you elaborate on your thought process behind that? Because that was something very interesting. No other composer really had us utilize that.
So I wanted to create some sort of connection between the performers. It's always interesting to see how performers interact on stage. And that is including just your regular chamber ensemble. You know, you cue each other, you breathe together, you move together. But I like seeing more of that collaboration, and it forces performers to interact together in a way that you wouldn't typically. And I do commend Natalie for being willing to share her instrument with two performers that don't play harp.
Natalie had to explain to us many times where the string we were supposed to hit was.
Yeah, hopefully it wasn't too difficult. Tried to keep it simple. But yeah, I mean, it adds a visual element to the piece that you wouldn't get otherwise, because I could have had Natalie play those parts and play at the same time that she was doing her thing. But it's never going to be completely together. It's never going to be perfectly concise if you have multiple people playing it. There is a performance aspect to it, which is the main thing that I was going for. And as an audience member, it grabs your interest. It makes you think about what sound you're listening to, who's making the sound, and why, which I hope people would do in general, not having to have some sound source that you have to pay attention specifically to, but, you know, deep listening to the instruments that are playing it, whether it's a saxophone or three harpists. So
yeah, we really enjoyed working on the piece. We premiered it at Michigan State, played it later at Bowling Green, and then performed it at the University of Michigan a while later. Timelines are hard. So one other thing that was different between you and a lot of the composers on the album is you were actually able to be there for the recording process. And how was it being on that side of a CD recording?
It was fun. It was interesting. I think that was one of the first times that I had done any sort of recording process. I think the next semester I took an audio recording techniques class, and really got into doing that sort of thing and understanding the concepts behind it. So with that being one of my first experiences, I didn't really understand how it would go. But they did give me a headset, and I could listen to the recording played back and give my comments to the performers, which had its benefits, you know, because you can say, oh, can you run this again? Can you do this again? Which I tried not to do too many times in the beginning, as we mentioned, the endurance issue of those long tones. But it was definitely rewarding to hear my music and hear it fold after repetitions to see how it came out differently. Yeah, I mean, thank you for having me there. I'm glad that I was able to go. It's always, I know we did a recording session when I wrote the piece Troposphere for you.
We did do a recording session of that.
Yeah,
I
actually, I think
forgot about that.
that was part of my audio recording engineers class. And it was so different being the engineer, but having that experience of already being in a recording session and seeing how it was run was really rewarding. And then being able to communicate with performers how, you know, you want your music to be played. Obviously, you want your musicians to play the music as they interpret it. But there's something to be said about that physical ability to be there as it's happening.
And for anyone who's interested, the piece she's talking about was a piece you wrote for me back in...
That was 2016.
That was 2016?
Yeah.
A piece for solo tenor saxophone that I premiered at the University of Oklahoma and did more performances of. A piece for kind of a disassembled tenor saxophone where you play different... you start on the mouthpiece, add the neck, add the rest of the instrument. Great piece if you're interested in listening. I believe that recording from the studio is on SoundCloud. Don't quote me
Your
on that.
SoundCloud.
My SoundCloud.
Wait, it should be on my SoundCloud too.
That's on yours too. It's somewhere on the internet. Google it. You'll find it. So, yeah, we were super happy you were able to join us for the recording session. We, with this CD project, we had 5 different composers. One in Michigan, one in New York, one in Florida, one at the time in Nevada, and then one that was in Ohio. So you were able to be there for the recording session. We were very happy you were able to join us. You and Josh were the only 2 that were able to be there for the recording process.
And even through the rehearsing in general, and even from the beginning, because it was, I mean, accessible with you guys being at Bowling Green, and then with Josh, even just before the recording process of just when we were performing for the concerts, which was really nice to be able to have that feedback accessible.
Yeah, many of the composers like Kincaid, and Brendan Sweeney and Brendan Nelson, none of us had ever met in person before recording a piece on their album. None of us had ever seen them.
So it made it a lot more difficult, or had its challenges of, like, it'd be cool, like, it's just so nice when you can have the composer there when you're rehearsing, just to be able to kind of, like, get those nitty-gritty questions.
Yeah.
And get feedback directly from you, and and you can hear it in person, because, I mean...
Oh, yeah, definitely very different in person versus
And
Skype.
Definitely, like, with COVID, these things have gotten better. All of us, I think, have kind of upgraded our technology. But back when we were recording this, like, I'm pretty sure we Skyped in Josh to one of our rehearsals, and it was just kind of, I set my laptop, like...
Yeah, you're using, like MacBook audio from whatever MacBook you had.
And I think we did it over Facebook Live, and now we have musician mode in Zoom, things like that, and things like Clean Feed that would really give us a better actual sound of what things would sound, of how a live performance would be. So great. Is there anything else anyone else wants to ask, or Emily, anything else you want to talk about with our collaboration or the piece?
Well, it was fun to write the piece. As always, it's interesting to write for something that you don't typically get asked to write for. It's challenging as a composer. I'm always open to people asking me, hey, do you want to write a piece for... I'm currently working on a piece for trombone and bass, electric bass, which is insane. Like, there's no piece for that. I've looked. And there's really not much electric bass classical music repertoire. So doing things that are not typical is interesting, it's thought-provoking for the composers, for the performers, and for the audience members. It's something that people aren't used to hearing. So I commend you guys for continuing the blank experiment with a new member. as an oboist. Uh, so I'm excited to see what you guys put out in the next year.
We don't know.
Who
Well,
knows?
we have some great composers who are writing some stuff for us. We have, because again, this instrumentation doesn't have a lot. This instrumentation has one really good piece.
Yes.
Pre-existing, so
It
we're
has
already
more
better.
than the last instrumentation.
There it is.
Not anymore.
Yeah, exactly. We're getting a few more. But yeah, so you mentioned a little about a bass trombone, electric bass piece. Are there any more projects you would like to share with the interwebs?
Well, I'm currently working on a piece for bass flute. Should be done in the next week or so. I'm writing it for Natalie Magana. She's a flutist who also went to BGSU, so you guys know who she is. But she's a fantastic performer, and I'm super excited to be working with her. We had talked in the beginning stages of quarantine about writing a piece and getting together to collaborate. So now's the time.
Well, great. If there's nothing else, thank you so much for joining us. It was great getting to talk with you and talk a little about your piece. And where can people find you and communicate with you?
Well, I have a SoundCloud. I have a personal website too. It's just Emily McPherson Composer. If you just type that, you'd find it. That's where the majority of my pieces are, my biographical information and other things. I think there's photos on there actually in my gallery of the Blank Experiment in their recording session. So if you haven't seen that, you should,
Oh,
you
cool.
should look that
Yeah,
up.
I didn't know you got pictures.
Yeah, I
from
didn't
the
know that.
recording session.
I'll be checking out your website.
I'll have to
definitely
send
gonna be
those
looking
to
at
you
them.
guys.
Yeah, I'll because I add pictures at the end because it after this you can hear her piece in full, and I add some pictures to it, so it's not just a blank screen. So that'd be great. I learned something new today as well.
Yeah, I'll send those to you then. I have
Awesome.
a bunch.
Ooh, perfect. Cool. So thank you so much, and you can check out her piece 631 Daybreak on on the Blank Experiment's debut album Conversations, available on Spotify, Apple Music, and anywhere else you can stream music nowadays. So thank you again.
Thank you.